welcome to the Hoop Collective Podcast presented by State Farm. We talk about the NBA, which we're doing on Sunday evening. Joining us from the center in Philadelphia, where he watched the Celtics come back from 26 points down to beat the 76ers on Sunday afternoon, is Tim Bontemps.
Hello, everybody.
Didn't sleep last night. I don't think you slept at all.
A little bit of sleep eventually, but wasn't at night.
Joining us from Cleveland, Ohio, where he had an interesting day, including talking to Nico Harrison and Jason Kidd about the Luka Doncic trade, and then watching a highly entertaining basketball game between the Mavs and the Cavs, where the Cavs scored 91 points in the first half and won by 40. It's Ban MacMahon.
Howdy, partners. Band sleep update. Got about 2 hours last night. Dozed for about 20 minutes. Missed the beginning of the third quarter of this.
Because you were sleeping?
Looks like it's going to be a Grizzlies win. No, of this night game. Grizzlies win over the Bucks here. That's about to wrap up.
I'm just glad to see Jaren Jackson back on the court after he had some blood coming out of his face. So that was a win.
Yeah. Dozed off at halftime of that thing. No, I was obviously I'm writing off of the.
You didn't watch me do the halftime show?
That's probably what put me to sleep.
So sad.
Hey, I was here for Cavs Corner. I met old Moondog. And Moondog, what? Hold on a second. People, this Moondog gave me a nice little gift bag. As you can see on YouTube here.
Let him know.
Got me. Let him know. Got me on a sweet little Moondog NBA Jam T-shirt. Okay, there's a dog.
That's Moondog and Sir Cece.
Oh, I didn't know who the other fellow was.
The Cavs for some reason have two mascots.
Well, Moondog.
Cavs Corner there's no time for only one mascot.
There's a dog tag, this little wristband, and then a let them know postcard that says, I'll read it to you. Howdy.
Because no one can read it.
Shut up, Bontemps. Oh, it should have said that, but it's implied if you listen. Howdy, partner. Welcome to my second favorite Hoop Collective podcaster. Parenthesis. We are all windy guys here in Northeast Ohio. Keep up the great content, Moondog. So, by process of elimination, you're dead last, Bontemps. So stop interrupting and shut your yap for one freaking podcast. That's straight from Moondog, baby.
I've said for years that he's the best dog in the league. All right, we're gonna go from dogs to foxes. Hey, did you like that?
Ooh. That's why you're his favorite podcaster, Northeast Ohio.
All right, we got a big three-way trade that happened on Sunday that briefly dulled the Doncic-Anthony Davis trade.
Hey, speaking of always in last place, how about those Chicago Bulls coming in last in a Spurs Kings deal again?
Well, I was talking to an executive today, and this is before the trade. And he's like, he was a Western Conference executive, and he was complaining about how hard the West is becoming. And he's like, you look at the Eastern Conference, the Bulls traded away. They let DeRozan walk in free agency, but I guess they traded him, and they traded away DeRozan and Alex Caruso, and they're in the exact same place. They're in the exact same place that they were. So anyway, the interesting part of this trade. So De'Aaron Fox goes to San Antonio, which from the moment that it was clear that the Kings were willing to trade him, that was the favorite thing to happen. Mm-hmm. And we'll discuss that at length. Zach LaVine, after being on the trade block essentially for the last year and a half or year plus, is freed 8 years after he signed an offer sheet with Sacramento. Vivek Ranadive finally gets his man with 2 years and about $100 million left on his contract.
Hey,
after that, you
got to give Vlade credit for finally getting his guy.
Well, Vlade's long gone. You mean Vivek?
Well, no, Vlade's had a great run. He was right about Luka, apparently.
Right. That's true. Okay, so you're right. It's been a great couple of days for Vlade, for the Vlade legacy as an executive. And the Bulls get, I guess, Kevin Huerter and a couple of, Trey Jones.
Trey Jones is a decent backup point guard. Zach Collins was salary filler and was the worst contract on the Spurs. The most important thing the Bulls got was their pick back.
Right. So
except the Bulls had a pick out that was top 10 protected and then top 8 protected twice. This team very easily could have just kept that pick. It shouldn't be treated as some grand gesture that the Bulls got this pick back. By the way,
they traded their best player and got the pick back. So it's a tanking move.
Oh, absolutely.
They don't have to tank anymore.
But they already were too bad. They already were bad enough that they were going to keep the pick anyway.
I agree.
And by the way, we should remind people, this pick was sent to San Antonio when they signed DeMar DeRozan a few years ago. By the way, when they signed DeMar DeRozan for about $1 gajillion more than anybody else was trying to pay him at the time. And so they did that.
That didn't turn out to be a bad contract, though.
It wasn't a good transaction. And then on top of that, as you mentioned, MacMahon, this summer, they trade DeMar DeRozan to Sacramento, and they get left out of all the good stuff in the trade. One of the things they get is a 2028 second-round pick from the Sacramento Kings in the deal. Well, guess what? In this trade, where they send Zach LaVine to the Kings, what goes back to the Kings? Their 2028 second-round pick.
Yeah.
So, again, just wonderful asset management by Arturas Karnisovas.
All of the DeRozan sign and trades were coming undone. They're coming undone. So
it's just truly staggering mismanagement.
The Bulls have wrapped up the DeMar DeRozan business now. It's official. They put a bow on that.
They've offloaded it to Sacramento, where the DeRozan LaVine pairing bore no fruit in Chicago. So let's take them older in Sacramento.
As a reminder, the Bulls have traded Zach LaVine, DeMar DeRozan, and Alex Caruso, and have gotten back their own first-round pick that they traded in another.
That they were
going to
get this year anyway. They were going
to get because it was already top 10 protected, and they're in the top 10, and they got Josh Giddey. That's the whole return from all three players. So,
all right, we've talked enough
Bulls.
about the Bulls. Let's talk about the two teams that actually are trying to get better now.
The reaction from the league, at least, I haven't polled all 29, 28 other teams, but the reaction from the league is, my God, these Spurs got De'Aaron Fox, didn't have to give up Stephon Castle. And look.
Oh, there was no way. No way.
The thing is, I'm not sure how much the Kings really tried to get him, because Castle isn't a great shooter. So,
but we're never giving up Stephon Castle in the trade. Let's just move on from that.
I'm confident that the Kings came in and said, we want Castle, and the Spurs were like, absolutely.
All right, but forget about that. Let's not move on from that. They didn't give up Castle. They didn't give up Devin Vassell. They didn't even give up Keon Johnson, who
Keldon
Johnson.
Johnson's on the Nets.
Yes, you're right. They didn't give up Keldon Johnson, who is a high quality reserve, but still.
No, he's not. But that's fine.
He's a quality reserve player. Yes, he is. Okay. They didn't. Wendy's point is they didn't. As far like Trey Jones, I think is a quality backup point guard, but like he wasn't going to be playing on this team that has Chris Paul and De'Aaron Fox. Now they didn't give up any of their young rotation players,
right? And they gave up Zach Collins, who's had the worst contract on the roster, as you said. Now it looks like they gave up 4 first-round picks, but they actually didn't.
They gave up 3 first-round picks, and one of them is a fake pick.
No, they gave up 4 total, but one's a fake pick.
Right. So they gave up Charlotte's pick this year, but
because we're counting the Bulls pick, right?
It's lottery protected, and if it doesn't convey, which it will not, because Charlotte is the 3rd worst team in the league, it turns into 2 second-round picks. So they were never getting a first-round pick. So it looks like 4 firsts, but now it's all the way down to 3. One of them is the Bulls pick, which we already said was likely not going to convey this year. So they give up their 2027 pick, which with De'Aaron Fox and Victor Wembanyama and 2 more years, I don't think this 2027 Spurs pick is going to be that good. And the only, sort of plus looking pick that they gave up is the Minnesota Timberwolves 2031 pick, which the only reason that's considered a good pick is because we don't know what the Wolves are going to be in 2031, and they might be terrible. They might still be good. The best pick that the Spurs had for this year is the Atlanta Hawks unprotected pick, which
or even their own this year.
True. Yeah. Even their own this year.
Those 2 are the picks that are the most immediate value.
They get De'Aaron Fox for no key rotation player. And they gave up some picks, but not their good picks.
Well, this is because the Bulls got involved and did them a huge favor by giving the Kings a very good player in the deal. So the Kings, I think, came out of this deal.
Very good players they've been trying to give away for 15 months.
Well, yes. Listen, I agree with that. Zach LaVine, if you look at Zach LaVine and De'Aaron Fox's numbers, they're not too dissimilar a player. So if you're the Kings and you come out of this with 2 first-round picks, 5 second-round picks, and a guy in Zach LaVine who is a guy who this year is averaging 24 points and 51% shooting and 45% from 3, Like, I'm not trying to say the Kings are going to go win the title, but given they had no leverage in this situation and they're sitting here with a guy they have to trade to one place, I think that's a pretty decent return. And again, the fact that the Kings can come out of this with Zach LaVine and the Bulls get themselves involved to get their pick back that they didn't need to do, I think that helped the Spurs get this done without having to give up more stuff in the deal.
Well, I'm going to tell you guys, the San Antonio Spurs are freaking thrilled.
I thought this was a great trade for them.
It's a great trade for them.
They got to trade, or they got to pay Fox. But you know what? You have the luxury of being able to pay Fox when you're still going to have time left on Victor's rookie contract. They still got a ton of picks coming, almost all of their own. I think they're only out one of their own picks. Still a couple from the
Hawks.
From the Hawks. By the way, the Kings didn't get back their own 2031 swap rights.
Yeah, I was surprised by that.
They still have 2030 swap rights on either Mavs or Wolves. And frankly, those Mavs swap rights are more valuable today than they were a couple days ago. They gave up, a decent, they gave up some quantity in draft picks, but they didn't give up high quality risk in the draft picks.
They gave up one. I mean, that Minnesota pick's a pretty high value.
Okay,
pick.
that I guess potentially
that was a good win for Sacramento. But when you look at the aggregate of what the Spurs had, the fact that they come out of this year's draft with the Atlanta pick, they keep the Atlanta swap, they keep the second Atlanta pick, like that's a good win for the Spurs. And look,
well, and rotation wise, they plug in De'Aaron Fox, who's obviously going to start, for a backup point guard. And that's like because Collins was kind of a fringe rotation guy at this point anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I have concerns about this De'Aaron Fox contract. I don't think by the end of it, it's going to be a great deal. I am not sure that I would have been going all in to have him be one of the cornerstones of my team with Victor Wembanyama.
And they didn't go all in.
Correct. Look, I like the price. Obviously, the price they got him at is a good price for sure. Like you do this trade if you're them for sure, and it makes it more palatable that they're going to end up paying him a deal that I think in the end is not going to look great this summer because they did keep so much of this other stuff in the deal. I also do think, though, that given the situation they were in, I think the Kings came out pretty good.
I thought they did fine. They got decent quantity in picks, including a bushel of second rounders, including the Charlotte ones that are essentially
they got 2 first 5 seconds in Zach LaVine for De'Aaron Fox. That's a good return given the fact that they're at one place for the guy to go.
And Zach LaVine, obviously there's some durability concerns, but dude, LaVine's having a phenomenal year.
I agree, but he doesn't drive winning.
That's fair.
Well, De'Aaron Fox has not driven winning either, guys.
Fair. That's fair. That's fair.
De'Aaron Fox and Zach LaVine are pretty comparable players. I think the Kings came out of this pretty good. Not great, but pretty good, especially given the situation they were in. And look, De'Aaron Fox is now being celebrated as a huge, massive piece.
Well, I'll tell you this.
There's a ton of pressure on De'Aaron Fox now. Like he's got to be a guy that's driving winning there.
I think he's going to have way more space to operate than he's ever had before because of the way Victor stretches the floor. And I think he could be a really good fit there. I don't know if he can be this. I don't know if he's the second best player on a championship level team. That's the question, and they're going to pay him like one. That's a fair assessment. The guy's made the playoffs once. So
again, okay.
I'm just saying, everybody's talking like this is.
There were some circumstances involved in the fact he only
I don't disagree, but everybody's talking about De'Aaron Fox like he's a superstar. The guy's made one All-Star. The guy's made one All-Star team, and he's a sub 35% three-point shooter
who averages 27-7 on decent efficiency. And frankly, by the time he's into the midway through that contract, I don't think he'll be their second best player. I think Stephon Castle is going to end up being their second best player.
Well, he might be.
And they might get somebody else because they're going to have tradable contracts and more picks.
Well, and that to me is the big takeaway is that their juiciest assets, especially in the short term, are still available. And so that's where I think whatever questions I have about Fox, it's definitely a big win for them because they kept most of their powder. And again, I just keep going back to the Bulls. The Bulls getting involved here really helped the Spurs out And I don't really see what the point was.
Well, that's a good point. Now, I will say this. Talked to one guy today who said, listen, this is a Western Conference guy. He goes, thank God that the Spurs didn't get Luka, because they could have put together a great package and Luka and Wemby would have been devastating. So, and that was never going to happen. And we're going to talk about that.
Well, heck,
Yeah,
maybe they still could.
We are absolutely going to get into that.
All right.
We can table that discussion for now, but we're going to get into that.
We're going to talk to Ramona Shelburne about the Lakers, and we'll be right back. All right. Right now, let's check out today's Magic Moments, brought to you by State Farm. Joining us from just across the mountain range, I don't know what's the proper, through the pass.
Santa Monica Mountains. Yeah, over the Sepulveda Pass.
Through the pass in the San Fernando Valley, our favorite Valley girl, Ramona Shelburne.
I always have to do the and
yeah. So Ramona, this has been quite a 24 hours in Los Angeles Lakers basketball.
Yeah.
There's just this incredible history of players coming to the Lakers mid-career. Whether it's Wilt Chamberlain, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Shaquille O'Neal, LeBron James, Pau Gasol, Elgin Baylor, and now Luka Doncic. And it's it's historic. I don't know if it'll end up like that with a statue outside crypto, but it's a continuation of history, and it's one of the reasons why there's Lakers exceptionalism in the world, because the Lakers do seem to be able to pull this off over the decades.
You know how fans on Twitter, whenever there's a great young player, Laker fans like to take their face and put a Laker jersey on them, and everybody else hates them for it, right? Like Victor comes into the league and they put a Laker jersey on him, and Luka comes into put a Laker jersey. How are we gonna get Luka? How are we gonna right? And I laugh, and yet they pull it off. They do it. Like, this is not a deal that they necessarily sought out. Even it came to them. Rob Pelinka and Nico Harrison had coffee across the street from the game a couple weeks ago in Dallas, and Nico Harrison threw it out there as a, hey, would you ever do this? And Rob kind of thought he was kidding at first, but then he wasn't kidding.
Yes, we would trade for Luka. Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, I I think it's they had to get there, obviously, and they had to keep it quiet. And I think that's one part I want to talk about a lot, is how everybody kept it quiet, and also why everybody kept it quiet. Because I think there is a lot of history here that we have to go back through in terms of trades that happened and didn't happen, and lessons that everybody involved learned from those trades. Let's start with Chris Paul in 2011. Okay, you and I go back. Chris Paul is traded to the Lakers. It breaks right as the Board of Governors is meeting in New York to ratify a CBA, which is intended to stop exactly this kind of a situation. Jeannie Buss is the Lakers representative because her father was having surgery at the time. He had a cancer diagnosis. He was having a surgery. He was in the hospital. Jim Buss, Mitch Kupchak are getting this trade together. There's a trade call. It got that far, and the details start to leak out, and every owner in New York who had a voice and a means to use it was livid, furious, and went straight to David Stern, beeline, and tried to break this up. And I've talked to Jeannie at length about this over the years of how timing and when the leak came out and when people knew factored into that trade being nullified by David Stern. And a lot of this was just her and her brother were not on the same page. They were not communicating. They were not in sync and in tandem strategically. And I think that's how trades like this of this magnitude get done. Nobody saw that Chris Paul trade coming, right? Do you remember where you were when you saw that?
I do. I was in Miami, and remember, Chris was the one. He came out of the lockout and asked for the trade. And so he asked for the trade. Yeah. And and by the way, it wasn't really a good trade. I don't think they necessarily did a better trade with the Clippers, but it was not a good trade.
No.
For New Orleans.
But it gets okay, so that's trade number one. Trade number two is when they trade for AD the first time. It was an absolute circus. It ruined the second half of that season. all those guys were trying to play and they heard their name in trade talks.
Right. They didn't actually make the trade
Right.
during the season, but he
Yeah.
was dancing around it. Yeah.
Yeah, and it ruined Anthony Davis's exit from New Orleans. Remember, they
Yes.
sat him at the end there, and he wore the
That's
shirt.
all, folks. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's all, folks. Which it was. I mean, no,
It was, yeah.
you know, it was all.
Yeah, it was all, and you know, all those guys on the team, Brandon Ingram, Lonzo Ball, everybody who ended up being in that trade heard their name and heard Laker fans all over them. And I remember Kobe Bryant at one point stepped into the fray and said, "Hey, listen, this is for Anthony Davis. You got to get over yourself. Like, don't take this so personal." But this went on for months, and
Yeah.
Magic Johnson was at the center of it. And then when he abruptly resigned,
I'm not going to be here.
Rob Pelinka ends up making this trade
Right.
in over the summer, and people forget this part, but it was after they hired Frank Vogel to be their head coach. Remember that? He had a press conference and they hadn't done the AD trade yet.
Well, the thing about the Vogel press conference was Magic had come on to First Take and
That's right.
called Rob, I think he called him a backstabber or
Yeah.
something like that. And here they're introducing Frank Vogel as head
Yeah.
coach. And, you know, I remember, like, I think it was
Yeah.
MacMahon who asked the question, Frank, congratulations on the job. Welcome to Los Angeles.
Yeah.
Rob, what about being called a backstabber?
Yeah.
Like, I seriously think the question went like that.
I think at one point, a couple of us did ask Frank a question, like,
Yeah.
but it was at least 10, 15 questions in, you know, "Hey, coach,
There's this
what do you
amazing
think
moment.
of this young roster?"
There's this amazing moment in that interview with Stephen A. where I think Stephen A. asks him,
Yeah.
was there anybody else who you're accusing of backstabbing you in the Laker organization? And Magic goes, "No, just Rob." It's just like this amazing
Yeah.
moment. Oh my God.
Yeah, and also,
So-
not to go all the way down the Laker rabbit hole, but this is following a dinner where, you know, Magic had abruptly resigned, and then there was a dinner between Magic, Jeannie Buss, and Lon Rosen, who was Magic's longtime agent. He also works with the Dodgers now, and I think Linda Rambis was there as well. Maybe Kurt was there. And they had a dinner and they basically said, "Hey, is there anything else we need to know?" Because, like, when Magic stepped down, like when you stepped down, there were some stories that came out. And if you got to say it now, speak your piece. And he goes, "Nope, I'm good." And then a week or two later, he went on First Take and said all that. So
Yeah.
that was not to go all the way down, but the rabbit hole. But it is instructive because when you get to a trade of this magnitude, one which gets nullified by the commissioner because they don't have their act together in terms of when it's going to be completed and how that's going to be. Like, if Jeannie would have been consulted at that point, she would have said, "You got to wait till the CBA passes and everyone's out of New York. Like, hold it a day. You got to hold this back." But there's no communication, there's no coordination. And so,
Right. I mean, they ended up in court against each other,
Oh.
Jeannie and Jim. So it's not,
yeah.
you know.
Not that shocking. Okay, so then there's that. And then the next one is the trade where it was a circus. It was an absolute circus.
Yeah.
Now, let's also go to trade number 3, which is something you and I have talked about a lot on this pod and continues to be relevant now, especially in light of this trade, which is the wild pursuit of LeBron James by the Golden State Warriors last year, where owner-to-owner conversations between Joe Lacob and Jeannie Buss, there's some level of interest on both sides. And instead of hashing out the details of a trade and kind of getting a trade package and going to LeBron late, they go to Rich Paul and said, "Is this something LJ would want to do?" And Rich says no. And the trade dies on the vine there. Even though, from what I understand, LeBron had conversations with other people, Draymond Green, there's a prominent businessman in Silicon Valley, had been involved there. And I think there was some indication that he was at least intrigued by this. And they shut it down.
Yeah, the Warriors don't make the call unless they think
Right.
LeBron's going to. At the time, LeBron did not
Yeah.
have a no trade clause. He does now. That's
Correct.
That's a difference.
So, what is different about this trade? They never went to any of the agents or players involved. No one got to say yes or no. No one got any feedback, because if you let anybody else know, if you let anyone else involved, the trade falls apart. The
Right.
trade can be said no. If they go to Luka Doncic and says, "Hey, you want to go to be traded to the Lakers?" I mean, I don't know what he says. I think if you're going to trade me, I guess this is a good spot. But I don't think he wanted to be traded from Dallas. And this is where you are. If you go to Rich Paul and Anthony Davis, "Hey, how do LeBron and AD feel about this trade?" does this get out of the starting blocks? I don't think so. And so I think like the lessons learned from all of these situations, all of these trades that did happen or didn't happen are how we get to where Nico Harrison, Rob Pelinka, Patrick Dumont, and Jeannie Buss are a part of the very small, I guess those four would be a square, but I think there was a circle. There was probably a few others that were privy to these talks, but it wasn't a large circle at all. And it held for several weeks as these conversations were taking place.
Remarkable on a lot of fronts. The thing I would say is, a big thing on this pod is actions over words.
Mm-hmm.
And the action here, Anthony Davis waives his trade kicker, $6 million. That action indicates to me he approves of the trade. He's cool with it. On some level, maybe he's not thrilled to be leaving LA where he's built a life and he's got a family.
He's got a show coming out later this month.
I know. I'm really interested in that show. It's like it's like a redux of the Austin Kutcher Punk show.
Yeah, and it's funny because on social media last night, everyone was like, "Wait, are we sure this isn't just part of the show?"
Good, that's good.
Where he jumps out and says, "Surprise!"
Because they
really
literally
get traded to Dallas.
They literally just started the promotion for it, right? Like it's
and by the way, Jeannie Buss has a show coming out on Netflix, which is it's not her, but it's based on her. Okay, and I mean that's coming out in the middle of this month as well. I think the premiere is on February 13th. I mean this. Like it is, you talk about life imitating art. Oh my gosh.
Right. So, and then you've got LeBron. MacMahon reported today that LeBron, he's like, don't call. I'm not waiving my no trade clause. So don't call. So
okay, sure. Nobody's going to call then. Sure. Okay.
Well, but that action, it's an action.
Yeah.
Leads me to believe that he's cool with this. Like, again, I'm not saying he's turning handsprings and saying this is perfect, exactly what I've always dreamed of. But, if he was upset, I'm not sure that he'd be dissuading people. So, actions over words, whatever that may get said. So, from the Lakers' perspective, Ramona, this is kind of obvious, but it's a key moment. Everything they've done since 2018 has been set on number 23. It's all been about LeBron, and rightfully so. Even in these later couple years where, they've theoretically built the team more around AD, that's not the case. LeBron is the lead dog. And that's no longer true, right? Like now number 77, all moves are about, and that's what the Lakers released today. Rob Pelinka's comments essentially said this. We're going to put a roster around him. We're going to, build around him. LeBron's name wasn't in the release. Not that it would have to be, but sometimes you see that. We'll build around. And that doesn't mean LeBron's done. He just had a
triple double.
Just had a brilliant game at the Garden. And and I don't think the roster is in good shape right now, but he can get there, especially if you give them the rest of this week and then next summer. But this is a transition. The center of the Lakers universe has shifted, and it needed to. It's not controversial. It's a beautiful moment. If you're going to shift it to a guy who's potentially a top 75, not top 75 all time player. So, I mean, but that's happened. This is now Luka Doncic's team, right?
Yeah, it is, and I mean, it's kind of, this is where we have to go back to Laker history again. All right. Kobe Bryant is winding down his career, and the Chris Paul trade was supposed to be that baton handoff. Okay. 2011, they trade for Chris Paul, and that gets undone. Chris Paul was 25 at the time. He was going to be the successor to Kobe. That's what that trade was.
Who else was 25?
Luka.
Yeah.
I mean, and these things are not coincidences. Who was Kobe's agent at the time of this trade? Rob Pelinka. Who was his Nike rep? Nico Harrison.
Yeah.
They traveled the world together. And I think that trade didn't end up happening. Later on, they end up trading for Dwight Howard. I think that what the Lakers hope, what everybody in LA has to hope now, is that Luka has the same kind of wake up moment from this trade and all the bad stuff that's coming out about him and his conditioning, his habits, etc., from Dallas and from those people who work closely with him there, and has the same kind of wake up moment Jokic did a couple years ago. I think he was similarly play his way into shape, used to have like back injuries, soft tissue injuries. He wasn't as reliable. And there was a particular series against the Portland Trailblazers where he ran out of gas. Like it was game 7. They had a back and forth series.
He disputed it. He would say, I'm not out of shape. I'm not running out of gas, but
he did.
I mean, actions over words. He changed his conditioning.
Oh, totally. And now he's one of the most incredibly conditioned athletes out there.
He's not in as good a shape as he was like 2-3 years ago, but he's still obviously in a much better condition than he was at the start of his career.
That's right. And I think it's really more about he started taking that part of being an NBA basketball player very seriously because he saw it was affecting his ability to win and his ability to break through. And he was about the same age Luka is now. I think he was maybe even a little older. So this sometimes takes some time for people to really learn. Like, I mean, Kobe wasn't always a fitness fiend or a diet guy, or probably LeBron wasn't either. I mean, Kobe used to talk about eating pizza and cheeseburgers and stuff earlier in his career. Like, time comes for us all, right? When we have to shape up. And I think maybe Luka's there, maybe not, but that's what the Lakers have to hope for.
Yeah, and like, look, I think the interesting thing, one of the big things so Nico Harrison had a press conference, and I talked to MacMahon about that, but today in Cleveland, and he used some weird language about Luka's contract. He's like, there was some details of Luka's contract. What that was code for is we didn't want to pay him $350. They were worried about paying him $70 million a year. And normally when you have a Supermax player who's Supermax eligible, you just want him to take the full contract.
Yeah.
And, okay, if he gets injured because, he gets a little older, then, okay. But, the Lakers are, I assume, going to make that investment. I assume that, it won't be as much money, by the way, because it won't be the Supermax, but it's still going to be, over $250 million. So I assume that the Lakers are going to be making that investment this summer. And I would hope, well, I shouldn't say I hope, but I would assume that Luka is going to sign it. All right, we're out of time, Momo. But thank you for providing this history because I think it's important. And I look forward to more of your coverage the rest of this week as Luka puts on the uniform for the first time.
First domino. First domino. God. There may be more.
It was a big one. It was a big one. All right. Thanks, Momo. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Bri.
Okay. The Tims are back. Thanks to Ramona. MacMahon, you went to a press conference today with Nico Harrison and Jason Kidd. They took questions. I respect Nico Harrison being in Cleveland and being in there and taking questions. The Lakers haven't yet. We'll see if they do. Your takeaways from that discussion.
Yeah, listen, it's a tough spot because they just made a tremendously unpopular trade. I mean, there are people protesting in front of the American Airlines Center in Dallas.
People brought a casket. There was a casket in front of the arena.
That was incredible.
You could not have made a more unpopular trade. The Mavericks fan base, they're protesting right by the Dirk statue. They thought that there was going to be a Luka statue nearby one day. You feel like, hey, we get 21 years from this guy. Luka wasn't going to last 21 years, but you're hoping you get 15 great ones out of him. And I get the Mavs fans just anger because this is a 25-year-old generational talent. This is a historic talent at 25 years old that you just traded. And the criticism that I'm hearing around the league is more not that they got out of the Luka business, because there frankly is some understanding of the reasoning of that around the league. It's more so that they didn't maximize the return. But for the Mavs fans, it's just flat out, how could you possibly want to get out of the Luka business? We are fresh off watching this guy lead the league in scoring, averaging basically a triple-double, and then lead this team to the finals. So it's going to be a tremendously unpopular trade. And Nico, I think, went up there uncomfortable and tried to kind of ease with humor, and the humor, I don't think it landed real well.
I mean, talking about like going and having a laugh with Rob Pelinka and doing the trade is not a great look. And also the line he had that to end your story, where he says, "Hey, look, we're looking at this to win now and in the future, and by the future, I mean 3 or 4 years from now, not 10 years from now." But by 10 years from now, we'll be buried, and maybe we'll have buried ourselves. Yeah, you might have buried yourself by making this trade, Nico. Like, I mean, it's just not – it's not a good look at all, and it just reflects badly on the process that went into the trade from start to finish, where whatever your opinion of the decision to trade Luka Doncic, at a minimum, if you're doing this trade with the Lakers, you got to get the 2 picks from the Lakers at a bare minimum.
Yeah.
And to come out of this without the 2 picks, without having really done any, canvassing of the value.
Yeah, I mean, he was just straight. He's like, yeah, I negotiated with one team. He just flat out said it.
And Nico's thing was they didn't want a circus. They didn't want a saga. They just wanted to get this done as quietly as possible, drop the bomb, and move on. Of course, you're getting a circus and you're getting a saga.
If you're going to trade Luka, if you're going to do this, you have to do it in 18 months after he's on the Supermax and he's on a 5-year extension, and you can trade him wherever you want.
Or even if you do it now. This is, when I talk to people around the league, again, there was a lot of, there were several people who were like, hey, I get wanting to get out of Luka business. A team knows their player better than anybody else. And frankly, like the concerns about the conditioning, all that stuff, none of that stuff is new. That's, been a thing. It's just part of the deal. So is the historic production, by the way. But again, there's understanding of that, but you've got to maximize the return, and you can't do that talking to one team. Now, the Mavericks' explanation is they were going to go get Anthony Davis. They were going to go get an all-NBA player who's also an all-defensive player who they feel like fits their time frame. And we'll get into the time frame here in a little bit because that's a very interesting statement. But again, so you get the Lakers' best offer. And at that point, you got to shop it. Hey, the Houston Rockets certainly aren't motivated to do anything. They've made that very clear. They also didn't think Luka Doncic was going to be available. I think if you call Houston, hey, what if you ask for Amin Thompson and 4 picks? Maybe it's Alperen Şengün and 4 picks, a young all-star and 4 picks. You could call San Antonio with look what they gave up for Fox. You're probably getting a lot more than that for Luka. Hey, Utah, you're desperate to find a star. You've got a ton of picks. Let's talk there. You got to call it. Hey, Oklahoma City. Oklahoma City is the one I think would not have engaged, but make them tell you no.
I think Bontemps, what he said is very true, though. Like when the Trailblazers did the Lillard trade, Lillard didn't want to go to. I mean, it wasn't like he was against Milwaukee. He wanted to go to Miami.
Yeah.
But because he was under long-term contract, he didn't have a choice.
Same with Donovan Mitchell. Same with Rudy Gobert. Again, if you have years on the deal, you have the ability. Like Utah isn't trading for Luka Doncic with a year and a half left on his deal. If he's got 5 years left on his deal, then anybody's in play. You got the Brooklyn Nets with 10,000 draft picks.
But Houston
they
might
could be in play.
San Antonio might with their situation.
I understand that, MacMahon. But the point is, if you're going to do this, the proper way to do it is to sign him to the extension, have him on the long-term contract, and then do it. If you're doing it now and the guy's got a year and a half left on his deal and it gets out that you're shopping him around, then it becomes the De'Aaron Fox situation. It becomes, I'm only going to go to X place. Right. And then your value gets driven down even further. So if you're going to do it this way now, you kind of have to identify a team or two, talk to them, not talk to anybody else and do it. The problem is doing it at all, because this is not the time to do it. And trading for a guy 6 years older is not the guy to be doing it for.
And I have actually had, I had a GM in the West tell me basically, hey, there's a credible case to be made that the Mavericks did get better right now. and again, a lot of that's based on Luka's relative struggles this season, what's going to look like when he gets back, their defensive issues. He said they can credibly make a case they got better right now, but they can't make a case that they maximize the return, and they absolutely shorten the window. And again, the fear of the Supermax was a massive factor, just like the fear of Cat's Supermax kicking in was a massive factor in him getting shipped to New York.
But this is where this is so dumb, and this is where this line of thinking from them is frankly patently insane. If they had signed Luka Doncic to the Supermax, which I think your reporting is that Luka was preparing to sign the thing this summer.
Yes, that was the anticipation for certain on his
side. If they had Luka Doncic signed to a Supermax, his trade value wasn't going down.
I agree with that. They were terrified of a Supermax commitment. They were terrified of being stuck like Philly with Embiid right now with I'm just telling you that
I understand, but that's not a rational argument. The guy's 25.
He's
explaining. Not 35.
Well, he's 25,
but MacMahon, you and I both know this isn't Joel Embiid.
He doesn't have the chronic knee issues. The calf is very concerning. The conditioning is very concerning. Again, you're talking. I could not have pulled the trigger on trading that type of talent before he hits the prime years. I couldn't have done it. I'm explaining to you what their thought process was.
Let me ask you this. What do the Mavericks do now?
I certainly don't think that Nico Harrison left his cell phone charger at home.
I mean, they've got one guy who can dribble on the roster. They got to get more guards this week.
Yeah, two. Dinwiddie is the second. I mean, we can talk about.
He's a guy on a minimum.
We can talk. Yeah, and we can talk about Dante Exum, Jaden Hardy. But I hear you. I was actually shocked. I was talking to another general manager today, and they made the statement, and it was like confidently that Kyrie right now is a better player than Luka. And I was taken aback by that. And again, I think Kyrie's an incredible talent, but Luka just led the league in.
I do not believe that.
Yeah, Luka just led the league in scoring and basically averaged a triple-double. I mean.
Yeah, the idea that Kyrie's a better player than him is also patently insane.
Yeah. But
there's a lot of patently insane things being said about this trade.
Bontemps is in prime form right now.
Bontemps is the patent office over here, the USWB patent office.
Listen.
But no, yeah.
Kyrie's had a great year. I thought he was the biggest snub on the All-Star teams in either conference, not making it. I know they're, I thought he should have clearly been the first guard or second guard that didn't start on the team, but he's not better than Luka. And
we'll see what Kyrie says. He didn't play today, so I guess he didn't speak to the media, but obviously
he didn't. He didn't speak to the media today. And again, I'm not making a big thing out of that. He didn't play. It's the norm for a guy who doesn't play not to speak to the media. This was not a normal situation.
True.
But he didn't speak to the media. I am certainly listen, he'll talk in Philly. Bontemps will be there. I'm sure just pelting them. So I'm curious to.
Listen, Kyrie has been nothing but a pro with the media for the last.
No, Kyrie's been phenomenal ever since. Yeah. I'll say it again. Ever since he's been to Dallas, he's been phenomenal as a leader for that team. He hasn't got to deal with in the locker room.
I'm not taking a position against anything here, but when the Mavericks did the Kyrie Irving trade, I thought it was a mistake.
I did too, and it has not been.
I told Nico as much to his face, and Nico had a vision and knew the pieces, had a relationship with Kyrie and made an educated gamble, and it has hit huge. And I have told Nico to his face, as I'm sure other people have, you got it right. You made a calculated risk there, and it paid off. So I have to acknowledge that he's done this before.
Yeah, and I didn't love, and again, if we're being real honest, our opinions are heavily influenced by the people who evaluate talent for a living, like the scouts, the executives that we're talking to. The PJ Washington trade was not well received throughout the league.
The guy was going to trade 2 first-round picks for Kyle Kuzma. His judgment and value assessment in trades has been poor.
Okay, the PJ Washington The PJ Washington deal didn't get great immediate feedback. Neither did the Daniel Gafford deal. Both those guys played significant roles in a finals run.
Correct.
This is a hell of a heat check, though, boys.
Yeah, I mean, this is going to define his career. There's a chance he's fired in the next 12 to 18 months, and it goes down as one of the worst trades in the history of the league. There is a chance where him shorting Luka, like we talked about on the emergency pod, works out, and he looks like some level of genius for doing it, and it'll be seen as a thing. But one way or the other, this trade is defining his career because it ain't a trade that's going to just kind of float away. Either it's going to lead to great things or it's going to lead to infamy, A or B.
I couldn't have put it better myself. All right. We got a lot to save up our energy with. Bontemps got to get back to New York. And MacMahon and I got to go to bed. Actually, I'm going to meet Bobby. I'm going to meet Bobby Marks to get smarter. So Bobby will be on Tuesdays or Wednesdays podcast.
I'm going to get some sleep to get smarter because 2 hours of sleep ain't real intelligent. Band sleep update,
only
baby.
then.
Yeah. Thanks for watching the Hoop Collective presented by State Farm. Thank you to Bontemps. Thank you to MacMahon. Thank you to Jackson, our producer. Thank you for watching and listening. We'll talk to you later this week.
Adios, amigos.